There's something about California that people don't talk about enough. Everyone sees the beaches, the sunshine, the movie star highways, but California is also one of the largest states in the country. And when you get past the postcards, past the tourist spots, you find a whole lot of empty space, a whole lot of dark. These are 3 stories sent to me by real people who still haven't fully made sense of what happened to them. I'll let you decide what you think. The first one comes from a woman named Danielle. She was 26 at the time, living in Sacramento, and she drove up to Shasta Trinity National Forest for a solo camping trip in mid-September. She'd done it before. She knew what she was doing. At least she thought she did. I'd been planning this trip for 2 months. I needed the reset. Work had been brutal. My apartment felt like a cage, and honestly, just getting out into the trees for a few days sounded like exactly what I needed. I packed my gear, told my roommate where I was going, dropped a pin on Google Maps for her, and left on a Friday morning. I found a dispersed campsite about 4 miles off the main forest road. No hookups, no neighbors, no cell service, just me, my tent, and about 1,000,000 pine trees. For the first day and a half, it was perfect. The 3rd night is when it started. I woke up at around 2 in the morning to this sound. And I want to be careful how I describe it, because I don't want to make it sound more dramatic than it was. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't some monster noise. It was knocking, slow, deliberate knocking, like someone rapping their knuckles against wood, except there was no wood. There were no structures within miles of me. I lay there completely still, my sleeping bag suddenly feeling very thin. The knocking stopped. Then, after maybe 30 seconds, it started again. Same rhythm. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. I told myself it was a woodpecker. I know how that sounds. It was 2 in the morning, but I needed a reason. I eventually fell back asleep. The next morning I walked the perimeter of my campsite, kind of laughing at myself, looking for whatever had made the noise. I found a tree about 40 feet from my tent, and at roughly eye level there were 3 marks carved into the bark. Not deep, not recent looking, but 3 clean horizontal lines, like something had dragged across it deliberately. I told myself an animal did it. I packed up camp 2 hours later and hiked back to my car. Here's the part I still think about. When I got back to the trailhead, there was one other vehicle in the small gravel lot. A gray pickup truck, older model, no plates. It hadn't been there when I arrived 3 days earlier. I drove past it slowly and I glanced at the cab. There was a person sitting in the driver's seat, just sitting there, engine off, staring straight forward, not at me, not at anything, just forward. I raised my hand in that way you do, that reflexive wave you give strangers in the wilderness. They didn't move, not even a blink. The second story is from a guy named Marcus. He's 31, grew up in the Bay Area, and at the time of this experience, he was living in a quiet suburb of Fresno. He described his neighborhood as completely ordinary. Ranch-style homes, 2-car garages. Everyone keeps to themselves but waves from the driveway. Normal. We'd lived on that street for almost 3 years. My wife and I knew our neighbors by name, knew their dogs, knew which houses had kids, and which ones had Ring cameras. It was the kind of street where nothing happened, which is why I noticed when something did. It started in late October, maybe a week before Halloween, so I almost dismissed it as decorations. I was taking the trash out one night around 10 o'clock, and I saw someone standing at the end of the cul-de-sac, just standing there in the dark at the edge of where the street light cuts out. I couldn't make out a face, couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. They were just still. I figured it was a neighbor out for a late walk, stopped to look at their phone or something. I went back inside, but I saw them again the next night. Same spot, same stillness, and the night after that. Every night for a week, between 9:30 and 10, there was a figure standing at the end of the street, always in that same patch of shadow just past the last street light. I mentioned it to my wife, and she thought I was losing it. She came outside one night and looked, and there was nobody there. But the second she went back in, I looked again, and they were back, far enough away that I couldn't be certain what I was seeing, but close enough that I knew something was there. On the 8th night, I walked toward them. I don't know why. I think I was tired of feeling afraid in my own driveway. I crossed the street. I walked down toward the end of the cul-de-sac, and when I got close enough, I saw it was a person wearing dark clothing, a jacket, jeans, shoes that were completely wrong for the weather, way too heavy for a warm October night. And they were holding something. Looked like a piece of paper or maybe a photograph. I said, "Hey, can I help you with something?" They turned and looked at me. And I know this sounds impossible to explain, but there was nothing threatening about their face. No scowl, no smirk, nothing sinister. Just completely, utterly blank, like someone had turned every emotion off. They folded whatever they were holding, put it in their jacket pocket, and walked away, not running, not rushing, just walked calmly down the side street and out of sight. I stood there for a minute, then I walked back home. 2 days later, my neighbor across the street, a retired teacher named Carolyn, knocked on my door. She asked if anyone had come to talk to me about the house at the end of the block, the one that had been vacant for about 8 months. I said no. Why? She told me that a man had come to her door asking questions about who used to live there. She described him, dark jacket, quiet, very still. He'd asked how long the house had been empty, whether anyone ever came back to it, and whether the previous residents had left anything behind. She said the strangest part was that when she answered the door, he was already holding a photograph of her house. Not taken that day, it looked old, faded, like something from years ago. Neither of us ever saw him again. The vacant house sold 3 months later. We never found out who bought it or why. My wife still doesn't believe me, but Carolyn does. The last story is from a man named Tyler. He was 29, driving back from visiting a college friend in San Luis Obispo, taking Highway 101 north, late on a Thursday night in January. I know better than to drive that stretch late at night in winter. The fog comes off the coast and just sits on the road like a wall. But I had work the next morning, and I didn't want to pay for a motel, so I pushed through. It was around 1:15 in the morning when my GPS lost signal. Which happens out there? Dead zones are real? I wasn't panicking. I knew the highway. I just needed to stay on 101. But then my headlights caught something in the road and I slowed way down. There was a car pulled over on the shoulder, flashers going, and a woman standing outside it waving her arms. I pulled over. I'm not an idiot. I left my car running and I cracked the window instead of getting out. She came up to my passenger side, and I could see her face in the dome light glow. She looked completely normal. Late 30s maybe, dressed for traveling. She said her tire had blown and her phone was dead, and she was trying to get to her sister's place in Paso Robles. I let her charge her phone off my car, USB, for a few minutes. I didn't let her in the car. I opened the door just enough to hand her the cable through the gap. She thanked me, stood at the side of her car, waited, completely polite. No red flags. After maybe 5 minutes, she knocked on my window and handed the cable back. She said her phone had enough charge now. She thanked me again. She walked back to her car. I sat there for a second, debated whether to wait until she drove off first. Then I just pulled out, got back on the highway. What happened next? I've gone back and forth on 100 times. About a mile up the road, in my rearview mirror, I saw her car, still on the shoulder, flashers still going. She hadn't moved. Maybe she was waiting for roadside assistance. Maybe she couldn't change the tire herself. I don't know. But her car was facing the wrong direction. I don't mean pulled over on the wrong side of the road. I mean facing south, back toward San Luis Obispo. When I'd passed her, she'd been heading north. Now her car was pointed the other way. I hadn't heard a car turn around. I hadn't seen headlights swing. She was just facing the other way. I drove to the next gas station, which was about 12 miles up, and I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes. I thought about calling 911, but I didn't know what to say. A woman with a flat tire, facing the wrong direction? I kept trying to explain it. Maybe I got turned around in my own head. Maybe the fog messed with my perspective. Maybe I just misread which way she was pointing. I've told myself all of those things. But when I finally got home and fell asleep, I dreamed about her face. And in the dream, she wasn't flagging me down because she needed help. She was flagging me down because she recognized me. And I still don't know from where.
I was 26 when this happened, and it was my first time ever going to Coachella. My friend Alyssa and I had talked about going for years, but either money got in the way or one of us couldn't get time off work. That year, everything finally lined up, so we actually committed to it. We flew out to California, rented a little 2-bedroom Airbnb, and made a whole trip out of it. We were both really excited because neither of us had ever been to a festival that big before. We had both been to smaller concerts and local stuff, but nothing on that level. The whole first day honestly felt like stepping into another world. Everywhere you looked, there were huge crowds, weird outfits, music coming from different directions, and people acting like they had no responsibilities at all. Best way to put it, it was a fairy tale world. It was kind of overwhelming at first, but in a good way. We had a really good first 2 days, nothing bad happened. We saw a bunch of artists we liked, took pictures everywhere, ate overpriced food, and stayed out late. We were tired by the end of each night, but it was worth it. By the third day, we were exhausted, but it was that kind of exhausted where you know you just have to push through because it's the last day and you don't want to waste it. Before the trip, Alyssa had brought up the idea of bringing Molly. I had only done it one other time years before, and it had been fine, so I agreed. We kept saying we'd save it for the last day, and that's exactly what we did. Looking back, I wish more than anything I never touched it. We took it in the late afternoon before one of the sets we were really excited for. At first, I didn't feel much. We were walking around trying to get closer to one of the stages, and I remember saying to Alyssa that I thought maybe it was weak or old because it wasn't hitting me. She said the same thing because she wasn't feeling much either. For a while, everything seemed normal. Then, out of nowhere, it started kicking in hard. At first, I actually liked it. I felt lighter, more social, and everything around me seemed brighter and more exciting. The music sounded amazing. I remember thinking that I understood why people did it at festivals. But after maybe an hour, something started bothering me. I kept noticing the same person. At first, I thought I was imagining it. There were thousands of people there, so of course you're gonna accidentally notice the same outfit or the same face more than once. But this wasn't like that. It was the same actual guy. The first time I really noticed him, he was maybe 20 feet away in the crowd. He looked older than most people around us, maybe around 35. He had dark hair, kind of scruffy facial hair, and was wearing a black shirt and boots, which already made him stand out because most people there were dressed way lighter and more colorful. He wasn't doing anything crazy, he was just standing there looking in our direction. I didn't let it bother me at first. Then later I saw him again near one of the drink stands, then again when we were moving between stages, then again when Alyssa and I were standing off to the side near a fence trying to decide where to go next. After the fourth or fifth time, I told Alyssa I kept seeing the same guy everywhere. She laughed and right away said it was probably just the Molly and that I was focusing too hard on random people. I remember laughing a little too because I didn't want to sound too paranoid, but it was getting hard to brush off. It wasn't like I was just noticing him in the distance once in a while. It felt like every time I turned around he was there. Not right next to me, but always somewhere in view. Hours went by like that. I was trying to still enjoy myself, but the high had started feeling off. It stopped being that warm, fun feeling and started turning into this restless, overstimulated feeling. My jaw tensed up, my heart felt too fast, and I couldn't seem to relax. I told myself I was probably dehydrated or tired. We had been doing a lot all weekend, barely sleeping, walking around in the heat, drinking, everything. At one point when we were packed into the crowd waiting for another set, that guy finally came right up to me. It happened so suddenly that I froze for a second. He came up on my side smiling and started trying to dance near me like he was just some random friendly festival guy. Then he leaned in and started saying stuff to me that I could barely hear over the music, but it was obvious he was flirting. I remember him saying I looked really good and asking if I was there with anyone. I told him I was there with my friend and tried to be polite about it because I didn't want to set him off or make a scene. I kind of smiled and shook my head and said I was good. He kept hovering though. It wasn't aggressive yet, but it was pushy enough to make me uncomfortable. I turned to pull Alyssa closer to me so we could just move away, and that was when I realized she wasn't there anymore. I started turning in circles looking for her, thinking maybe she just moved a few feet away, but I couldn't see her anywhere. That made me panic way faster than it normally would because of how off I already felt. The guy noticed right away that I was looking around and asked if I lost my friend. I said yes. Then he said he could help me look for her. There was something about the way he said it that made me instantly not trust him at all. It was too eager. I just told him no thanks and started pushing my way out of the crowd. He didn't grab me or anything, but I could feel him watching me leave. I finally got away from that stage and found a patch of grass farther back where it was quieter and less packed. I sat down because I felt like my body was shutting down on me. My vision started getting weird in a way I never felt before. The best way I can describe it is that everything looked squiggly. Not blurry exactly, but like nothing would stay still. The lights, the people, even the ground all had this shaky look to them. It scared me because I knew then that I had taken too much or had some kind of bad reaction. I started calling Alyssa over and over. The calls kept failing or not going through because the service there was terrible. I probably called her 10 times before one finally connected. When she picked up, I could barely hear her, but I just kept telling her where I was and that I needed her to come get me because something was wrong. It felt like forever before she found me, but it was probably only around 15 minutes. She could tell right away I was not okay. I told her I needed to leave, and she didn't argue with me. We ended up leaving the festival way earlier than we planned because I was having such a bad high. The walk out felt endless. Every noise felt too loud, and every person brushing past me made me jump. I kept looking around, half expecting to see that same guy again, but I didn't. Back at the Airbnb, both of us were completely drained. We had one more night there, and then we were flying home the next evening. Alyssa started talking about packing some of her stuff up that night so she wouldn't have to do it in the morning, but I told her I'd do mine tomorrow. I just wanted to lay down. My body was exhausted in a way that overpowered everything else. Even though I was still high, I felt so physically dead that I just crawled into bed, shut the light off, and laid there in the dark. I didn't feel normal, but I felt too tired to care. I must have drifted off into this half-sleep state because I wasn't fully out, but I definitely lost track of time. Then at some point, I opened my eyes. I have no idea what woke me up. Maybe a sound, maybe just my body being on edge. But the second I looked toward the bedroom doorway, I saw a figure standing there. It was tall and completely still, just inside the doorway, facing me. At first, my brain couldn't even process what I was looking at. I thought maybe Alyssa was standing there for some reason, but it was too tall and broad. Then I focused on the face. Even in the dark, I could tell. It was the man from the festival. I know how insane that sounds, especially with the state I was in, but that's exactly what I saw. He stood there looking at me from a few feet away from my bed. I remember this horrible, cold feeling going through my whole body. Then I started screaming. Not just yelling, full-on screaming as loud as I could while throwing the covers over my head like that was going to do something. I kept screaming until Alyssa came into my room. The second she turned on the light, there was nobody there. The doorway was empty. The room was empty. Alyssa kept asking me what happened, and I was crying so hard I could barely get the words out. I told her I saw the guy from the festival standing in my doorway. She looked freaked out by how serious I was, but she kept telling me that it had to be the drugs and that I was still having a bad high. I honestly wanted to believe her, because the other option was way worse. But what bothered me was how real it looked. It didn't feel dreamlike at all. It felt like waking up and seeing an actual person in the room. I begged Alyssa to sleep in the bed with me that night, and she did. Neither of us wanted to go back to sleep after that, so we laid there talking quietly for a while with the lights on in the hallway. She kept trying to calm me down and make normal conversation. Eventually, somehow, we both drifted off. The next morning, I woke up to Alyssa screaming my name and shaking me. For a second, I thought maybe I was still dreaming. Then I sat up and saw her standing near my bedroom doorway, staring at the floor. I looked down and saw muddy boot prints on the hardwood. I still get chills thinking about it. They started near the front part of the house and came down the hall. Then they stopped right at the doorway, exactly where I had seen that figure standing. After that, the prints turned around and went back down the hall toward the front door. I remember just staring at them, feeling this rush of sickness go through me. It was like my whole body dropped. That was the moment I realized what I saw was not some Molly hallucination. Somebody had really been inside that house while we were sleeping, or while I was half asleep. And unless there was some impossible coincidence, it was him. Alyssa looked just as scared as I felt. We started checking everything right away. We made sure the front door was locked now, checked the windows, checked both bedrooms, the bathroom, every room. Nothing obvious was missing, which somehow made it creepier to me. It meant whoever came in wasn't just trying to steal something. We packed faster than I thought possible. Neither of us showered, ate, or even really talked much. We just threw everything into our suitcases and got out of there. Once we were out, we contacted the Airbnb host and told them someone had broken in during the night. I remember sending pictures of the prints because I wanted proof that I wasn't crazy. The host sounded shocked and apologetic, but by then I didn't care. I just wanted to leave. We spent the rest of that day basically on edge until it was finally time to go to the airport. We made it home safely and nothing else happened, but that whole trip has stayed with me ever since. What bothers me most is not knowing exactly how he found us, assuming it really was him. Maybe he followed us when we left. Maybe he saw us call a ride. Maybe he watched from farther away than I realized. I don't know. I just know I saw that man at the festival over and over, then I saw him in the doorway, and the boot prints proved someone had actually been there. Ever since that happened, I have never touched Molly again or any drug like it. People joke about bad trips, but that experience permanently changed how I think. Even now, I guess due to PTSD, I still glance at the bedroom doorway first before anything else. Over the summer, my girlfriend from college, Valentina, invited me to come visit her family. Her family lives in San Diego, California. My parents basically forced me to go because I wasn't doing anything else that summer besides working and sleeping. It was a Friday afternoon, and I had just gotten off my plane. The flight felt like forever since I was flying across the country. I got a text from Valentina telling me to come outside so she could pick me up. She and her dad came to pick me up in an old Toyota. I don't remember much from the car ride to her beach house, though. We pulled up to a beautiful villa on the beach. Valentina's dad helped me get my suitcase out and escorted me to my room. My room was on the lower level, separated from everyone else upstairs. For a guest room, however, it had a great view of the beach. I could also see the side stairs that led to the front door on the second floor. I unpacked my clothes and toiletries, trying to get settled into my room. Then I heard knocking on my door. It was Valentina. She wanted me to meet her siblings, but I'm not going to talk about them much, as they're irrelevant to the story. However, she introduced me to her mom. Her mom was a nice older woman. She made me feel welcomed. Valentina ended the conversation when she said she was taking me to the beach. She went upstairs to change. I went to my room to do the same. We got on the beach and the sun was setting. She told me it's a great time to take some pictures for my Instagram. Being the nice and helpful person I am, I agreed I would take her pictures. The beach was crowded, so I knew this would be difficult. I probably took 100 pictures before she was finally satisfied. I looked back at the pictures, and something was off about them. I noticed a man in the background of every picture, sometimes staring at Valentina from behind or staring at me. I looked at the general direction he was standing in the most recent picture, but he was gone. I muttered to myself, what the f***? I tried telling Valentina, but she just shrugged it off. I started to feel very paranoid. I always had the fear of someone stalking me. I knew I had to be a man and hide this fear. Later, Valentina and I went back out to the beach. It was around midnight, and one of her best friends was having a bonfire. We walked down to the beach to the gathering. After being a social butterfly for a while, my boss called me. He was pretty chill, so I told him about my trip and when I would be back. As I was talking to him, I saw a black figure on the beach, just staring at me. I pretended not to see him and just turned the other direction. I guess my boss noticed my sudden pause because he asked, "Are you okay?" I responded quickly saying, "Yeah, I was just a little surprised by what I just saw." He didn't question it and immediately got back on topic. The party started to die down. People were finishing up their drinks and getting into their Ubers. I asked Valentina's best friend, who was sober, if she could drive us home. She agreed to take us home since we were a 2-minute drive away. In the car, Valentina asked me, why didn't we just walk back on the beach? I was debating whether I should tell her the truth or if I should just make something up. I told her, "You're absolutely plastered right now. There's no way you're walking." She rolled her eyes. We got home and I helped her upstairs because I needed her to be quiet. I slept in her room that night because I didn't feel safe being alone downstairs near the beach. The next day came. I woke up with a feeling of having to throw up. I stayed in bed all day. I told Valentina and her parents that I just needed rest for a day. Then I would be able to function for the rest of the week. I woke up around 7 p.m. to Valentina knocking on my door. She told me they're going to downtown San Diego for dinner, but would be back before midnight. I nodded my head in agreement, then went back to sleep. I started to have a dream of someone tapping on a glass table rapidly. It was getting so annoying that I woke up. The tapping stopped. I turned on my side to face the exterior stairs, and that was when I saw it. I saw the guy from the pictures at the beach at my window, waving at me. He had a black hood on. He went running up the stairs, where I heard the front door open. I nearly screamed. Wasn't the front door locked? How was he in the house? I went to my door and put my weight on it. He wasn't getting in. I heard nothing. No one going down the stairs or anything. Then I heard someone on the other side of the door jerking the door handle. He was trying to put his weight into the door, but nothing was coming through that door. I heard him back away from the door. That's when I grabbed my phone and called 911. It took 5 minutes before I heard the police opening the front door. I decided it was safe to leave my room, and I booked it upstairs. But of course, the creep had left long before the cops showed up. Shortly behind the cops, Valentina's family showed up worried. They asked me if I was okay, but that wasn't what was important. I needed to make sure he didn't take or do anything. I heard a scream from Valentina as she went to her room. I followed her in. She pointed to a camera in the corner of the room. The police took it for investigation. The creep also took Valentina's clothes and bathing suits. I stayed for the rest of the week, but I'm still scared from that experience 2 months later. I don't know how that guy found us or what his intentions were. I didn't know if he wanted me or Valentina. But most frightening, what would he have done if he did get into my room?